In episode 65, Alex Adams shared why songwriting is such a powerful tool in the music classroom. And now, in today's interview, Alex will share some free materials and information about how to get started.
Welcome to Pass the Baton, empowering students in music education. Here, we amplify the voices of music teachers around the world who are passing the baton and creating environments where the music students are empowered. Together, we can help students transform from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. I'm Kathryn Finch.
And I'm Theresa Hoover. We are so glad to be back with you again.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kathryn, we talked, Alex's interview last week was awesome. He was telling us about songwriting. Now we need to get into the nitty gritty of what does this look like? How are we going to do it? And where do we get started? I mean, as I talked about in the episode, I'm really good at dots on a page. Songwriting is not something that comes natural to me. But I felt like what Alex did in this second half of the interview was really help me figure out no, this is something that I can do. And here are some practical tools. What do you think?
And I come from I did create music myself, compose music when I was younger, and I do create music from children's books, and I do create songs for my students, to use for various different reasons. And I'm thinking, why don't I do this with the kids? And I still kind of have the same concern of how, but he really kind of explains really well, what you really could do with kids. And I know my kids are going to love it. Can't wait to get started.
Yeah. Awesome. Before we get to that, just remember again, show notes. They are in your podcast player or linked below the YouTube video. Definitely check them out because as we mentioned, last week, Alex shared some really great resources, free resources. We all like free resources. So those are all linked in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. And while you're there in your podcast player or YouTube, make sure that you subscribe, you follow, you leave us a review, especially the reviews that have comments. We love those. They're really helpful in just getting this work that these people are doing out to more people.
Yeah. Yep. We also, in addition, have the Buy Me a Coffee site. So for the less than a cup of coffee, you can send us some support, which is really helpful with podcasting fees and expenses.
So we have the worst or most boring song in the world, and it's done. But now what I'll talk about with my students, they'll say, okay, well, in doing that, we identified a whole bunch of stuff, right? We've got a melody. Our melody was, oh, or oh. We had words. We had, oh. We had some kind of form. It was just that over and over again. There was nothing that contrasted with it. So if we wanted to make the second worst song in the world, what could we do? Could we change some of those things? And then you can start talking about elements. And this is one approach. This is an approach that's really comfortable for a lot of music teachers because we're really comfortable talking about elements of music. There's rhythm, there's voice. You're not thinking about pop form necessarily yet. You're not trying to tear anything out. But this is an example of using a really defined activity to then open up into possibilities. So what you do is you say, okay, now we have the worst song in the world. Now what I want you to do in small groups is you all have to compose the second worst song in the world. Now you get two choices. You have two notes, two words. One of them has to be, oh, because that's where we're starting at. So whatever you're the kids, this is probably pitched towards younger middle school, maybe elementary school, because that's where my heart is. But one of the things you can do there is you then expand and you start talking about making intentional creative choices. And these intentional creative choices that you're making aren't necessarily tied to your artistic ability. They're not necessarily tied to your musical knowledge. You're just making choices and playing. And that is sort of the best way in to songwriting that I have found. I think that opening up and playing in the space is so useful. And it goes from highly scaffolded, just one thing, to slightly less scaffolded, two things, but you get to choose one of them, to now could you write a song that's a whole line? What happens if we all write a song that's about the same thing, but it's just one line long? How many different lines do we get? Oh, all of a sudden we have 22 different lines. Do you think we could make a song out of 22 different sentences? I think we could probably find a verse in there. And then you can start talking about forms and how things relate and how we thought about things and what kinds of contours are we hearing in the melodies. Like, are there big high note? Like, it gives you all of these ways to relate both to popular music, song forms, creativity that are not limited by musical ability or age or complexity, but are directly related to experience, play, and the students driving the bus. And you're still setting the boundary, right? You're still creating the sandbox for us to play in.
Okay. So my question is, someone like me who's really good at dots.
Yeah.
So or really any teachers who the songwriting is not something that we do naturally. And I know you're going to say, so you can still teach it, but what are, like, you mentioned before, like we started, you had some like tips and templates and
yeah, I have a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I do. There are
Help so there's me.
Yeah. So I'm gonna tell you two things.
Okay.
I think you do write songs naturally. I don't think that you can really help it. I think every musician has been walking around and heard some snip of melody somewhere, and you're like, is that something? I think that might be my own thing. I think I might be having a thought.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I definitely can think back to, like, times when I would sing random instructions at my band. So maybe that's songwriting.
It's the beginning, definitely. One of the things, the only reason I bring that up is I think a lot of people think, I won't actually, you know what, I'm not going to construct it that way. I will say that folks who are new to almost anything, and I will say this as a person who is an anxious person, they get anxious about whether or not they're doing it right. Mm-hmm. And that's good. That means you care. You care that you're doing it right. Great. There isn't really a bar to writing a song. What do you need to do to write a song? You just write a song. That's it. It's like a tautology, right? If you wanted to be a professional songwriter, then you could worry about the quality of your craft. But as teachers, I think our goal should be to make people aware that there is craft, to introduce elements of that craft, but we do not necessarily have to be experts at that craft. Like, I am not an expert saxophonist, but I have taught many students how to play the first notes of the saxophone, right? So just being aware that you don't have to be an all-knowing expert, you don't have to have a depth of craft. Your songs don't have to be any better than your students' songs. Like, don't even worry about it. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to give our students musical tools and agency, right, in their own world. And so this is just one other set of tools that you can develop and help them develop. So, like, don't feel like just because you're good at the dots, you can't do the songwriting stuff, because you totally can. And in fact, being good at the dots is a good way in, because once you have the dots, you can think about them. So think about your favorite dots and why they're meaningful to you. Like, if you have a melody that you absolutely love, a horn melody, for example, right? Like, I know you're playing horn in the concert band right now, mm-hmm. Theresa. So do you have a line that you absolutely love that you're playing? Maybe not this time. It varies. But think about that line and think about what makes it effective for you. What does it make you see? Right? Stick a visual on it. Then write out that visual. Then sing the visual to your line. Congratulations. You have now written the first line of your song. But thinking about why you love those things and how they function works really well if you already have a grasp of the dots. Applying the dots to that when you don't have a grasp of the dots is empowering, because it lets you see it in a different way. It's just different ways of seeing the same thing. As far as stuff you could do tomorrow, I sent you a bunch of stuff in a Google Drive, which is made public. You can post that in the description of wherever this is. And also my website, which is Mr. MR, it's MR, MrAlexAdams.com, has it has a resource called Songwriting 3 Ways, which is 3 sort of set menus of ways to start songs Three lyrics first approaches, three ways of creating melody and harmony, and then three ways of preserving. So you can choose your own adventure through that, and you can
Nice.
get like 9 iterative ways to develop it. And I would highly suggest that teachers, before they teach songwriting, just write a song on your own. Like tomorrow, like sit down, grab a starter or a prompt, and just write something. And it doesn't even have to be a whole song. It could just be like 3 lines that you like, um, just to get the muscles moving. There are also a couple of things in that in the public Google Drive that are pretty straight ahead and easy. One thing to get started. Hold on, I'm gonna dial it back a second. I had 3 sentences trying to start at once. I have to come back. So when you start writing a song, right, you can broadly chop a song into 3 elements, and this is very broad. You have your harmony, your melody, and your lyrics, right? Those are the 3. You can just, I'm going to make arbitrary chops there. There's a whole bunch of other things we could talk about. We could chop it up a bunch of different ways, but those are the 3 I'm talking about. Think about which one you want to start with and start there. The thing that a lot of people struggle with is lyrics. Your lyrics do not have to mean anything, and they don't have to come from anywhere. One of my favorite ways to do this is to do a blackout poem and then turn that into lyrics, because then I don't have to generate any lyrics. I can literally just go to a newspaper, find a story, and only preserve the important parts. So that's on my website under the blackout method, where I went, and this one is formatted as a pamphlet, so you could actually print it out and have a little pamphlet to flip through. But I went to Tempe local newspaper. They had a story about a coffee shop that was closed due to a bomb threat because there was a drag event there. And I went through the story and I blacked out all of the information that wasn't essential information or evocative writing. And it left me with this bank that I turned into songs. I turned into song lyrics. And the thing that hit me about that story was that one of the people at the coffee shop mentioned that this is nothing new. And that to me was a really powerful sentiment. Like, this sort of horrifying thing, but it's we're all accustomed to it. It's nothing new. So I used that as a refrain and I built a chorus around it. But I didn't use any new words. I only used the words that were in the newspaper. So your words don't even have to be your own to be really meaningful. They can just speak to you and you can speak them again.
You just made me think, like, I mean, I think that's how I make lessons with children's books. I pick them up and I see the patterns, and all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, that sounds like a good refrain. And all of a sudden now I have a new music lesson, and yeah.
That is a fantastic insight there. That's one of the ways that I'm working on this course for ASU this summer. And one of the things I'm doing is developing song cycles and songwriting around fiction. But you could do that in an elementary school classroom in the same way that you would do story scoring, right? You score a book. Why not write the book as a song? Like, what are the most important parts? What are the most important things that they say? What do they say over and over again? Mm-hmm. And then turning that into a song would be a really great way to do that. And you're doing that on your own for you. You could turn that process out to your students and ask them to do it with you, and then give them a whole new insight on how songs are constructed and how information and feeling are conveyed in 2 different ways, right? Like, how do we feel reading the book? How do we feel listening to this? How do we feel writing the song? How do we feel showing the book and singing the song? Like, there are all these ways that feeling and connection are made, right? Yeah, excellent. That's an excellent way to do it. I would ask teachers rather to feel empowered to do that with their students, to think about the ways that they create and how they can open that process to their students to their students by asking a few generative questions and asking students to think creatively with the material that they're working with. Also in that package of stuff, there are a couple of other ways to start songs. One of them is these are all lyrics first approaches. I find that generating lyrics for a lot of people is the hardest first step. And if you can put a boundary around that, it allows some plausible deniability, right? Well, I didn't really want to write that stupid lyric. Mr. Adams made me because, we had to use these words and, it's not really me. But then if it comes out good, they'll be like, yeah, I did that. Yeah, no. Uh-huh.
Of course.
Yeah. So I'll eat all the failure all day long. That's
Sure.
partially how I set up my guardrails on my projects is like, how can the students assign failure to me and success to them? So there's one there that's a bullseye word bank. You pull it up. It looks like this. I actually happen to have it printed out right here. It looks like a bullseye.
Pretty.
If you've ever seen a target, it looks exactly like a target. And what you do is you put in the center a central idea or image. The second circle is words related to or describing the center. And then the third circle is words relating to or describing the second circle. And so what you have is you have this big web of words to pull from. And then you build, I don't know why I put it down. You build on this side just a whole bunch of sentences using that word that are about your central subject using these terms.
Nice.
And this can, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say those are right there in the Google Drive that I could for us to print.
Yeah,
right.
You could go grab it and print it out and do it right now. And that can be done as a whole group activity, or it can be done individually. Collaborative group songwriting is totally cool and totally doable. And you can totally do it in any setting. You can do it in a concert band. You can do it in an orchestra. You can do it in a chorus. You can do it in a general music classroom. Now, they all look a little different. And if you're curious about how those things look different, send me an email. I'll tell you all about it. I'm happy to talk with anybody at any time about almost anything, but specifically right now to songwriting. And then some other things that are in there are there's a worksheet that's variations on a theme where you choose a theme and then you write 4 sentences on that theme. One that's an action, one that's an emotion that relates to that theme. So like if I were writing about student empowerment, for example, maybe my action is students creating something of their own is a thing for me that is indicative of student empowerment. Yeah. The emotion that I feel when students are making something of their own or being empowered, happy and grateful to share in that space with them. What does it feel like in my body? My mind is running 1,000,000 miles an hour because I've just been asked 13 questions. And then what does it look like from outside? Like it might look like 15 pens scratching on the table, scratching on the paper, right? And then I have 4 lines. Those 4 lines can either be rhymed, reworded, reconstituted, interpolated, sing them backwards, translate them into another language, whatever you want to do with them. But that gives you your bank to work from. And having something to work from is often easier for both students and teachers. It takes some of that responsibility of not having anything to start from away. All of the things in that folder are like that. Another one is the word ladder, where you take a set of things, you take a profession and then things you can see, and they're 2 completely generally contrasting ideas. You can also do this by opening 2 different books in 2 different genres. And pulling words from them, and then you connect the words in novel ways and build sentences. That's a technique that's taken from Jeff Tweedy. I don't know if anybody listens to Wilco, but Jeff Tweedy is a fantastic songwriter. And once you do that exercise a couple of times, you're like, yeah, I hear it. There's also object writing, which is something that I took from Pat Pattinson's. He's got on online, The Idiot's Guide to Object Writing is the easiest place to get it. But Pat Pattinson has also written a great book called Songwriting Without Boundaries, which is like a workbook of lyrical stuff. A lot of songwriting books and resources are sort of aimed more at songwriters than teachers. Sarah Gulish and Kat Reinert have Songwriting for Music Educators, which is on F-Flat. Yep. That's one resource that's pointed directly at music educators. Another resource that I would point folks to that isn't in the, I should talk about what object writing is before I get into that. Object writing is using your senses to write about an object. So you take 2 minutes or 3 minutes and you choose something and you write about it. And your first set of writing for 3 minutes will be all about what did you see? What do you see when you look at this thing? So like in the example that I have in my object writing example, it's all about roller coasters and a time that I went on a roller coaster or imagining a roller coaster. So if I close my eyes and I put myself on the roller coaster, what do I see? What do I smell? What do I hear? What do I taste? How does my body feel? How do I feel emotionally on the roller coaster? And then those timed writings become the places you look for evocative sentences or images, and you pull those out and those become your lyrics. One book that I would definitely recommend to anybody who is interested in songwriting and hasn't done very much of it is this book. It's called Take It to the Bridge, and it is by Steve Dawson and Mark Caro. This is a book that I really like because not only does it have a bunch of useful lessons and instructions on songwriting in the back, more so than almost any book I've ever seen. It's also just a pretty book, but it's got all kinds of like assignments that are really well scaffolded for teaching yourself how to do songwriting that are approached in a really excellent way. But the first 100 pages of this book is just two people talking about what songwriting is and their experience of it. And it's written in a super accessible and relatable way. So it's written by human people speaking human language to each other. And you can tell that they like each other. And they're talking about the experience of taking songwriting classes, what songwriting has done for them, how they think about songwriting. I don't necessarily agree with all of the stuff that's in there. We have differences of taste and opinion, but I think that this is one of the most accessible and useful resources for somebody who is interested and knows absolutely nothing, because it's like sitting down and listening to a couple of people talk about a thing that you're really interested in, and then they give you 13 ways to do it.
Mm.
I really quite like that book. Yeah, but aside from that, there are all kinds of things that you can do. There were two more things. I forget what they were. Doesn't super matter. Blackout, object writing, word ladder, variations on a theme, and the bullseye. No, we did them all. Hooray, we got there.
Yay.
And then I also put in a chord wheel in there. This is not something that this is not something that music teachers wouldn't know, but it can be a helpful resource, which is I just did the circle of fifths and then did a Roman numeral analysis around the circle of fifths. And then some chord types that you could sub in for those chords. So like if you're getting sick of playing major 1, 4, 5, well, you can make one of them a 6/9 chord, or you can make one of them an add 9 chord, or you can make one of them a sus2 chord or a sus4 chord, and it will all have the same function but different tonal colors. So if you want to get different sounds, like some folks write songs from their instruments. I'm somebody who does that a lot because I play a chording instrument. So if you're somebody who plays piano or guitar or ukulele or mandolin or I don't know, saz, or what else is there? There's all kinds of chording instruments out there. Nickel harpa, you figure it out. You know, you can get some overtones going, singing counterpoint, anything where your voice is up. Anyway, but this will give you opportunities to think about different chords and tonal colors, which can give you different melodic options. And I'm not going to do a lot of this, but one sort of famous example.
Here, turn on your original sound real quick.
Oh,
sorry.
But D sus4, D sus2 is Tom Petty's Free Fallin', and it's also Needles and Pins by the Searchers, and it's a whole bunch of songs. But that sus4, sus2 sound is very present. Sus4, sus2, very, very present in pop music. And we don't often talk about the function of sus chords in pop music in undergraduate music theory.
No, we don't.
So this map, this wheel can sort of be used as a map to explore.
Perfect.
Yeah. One thing though, Alex, I'm thinking of as a general music teacher, I heard you say like you're going to collect a lot of this in audio, And so I guess as someone who has lots of children, I wouldn't do this assignment with all, K-5, all my children. But I guess if I'm working on a class size or a grade level, I kind of answered my question when I was, thinking about it, but you just want to make it doable with like audio that's within some kind of learning management system or some place where it kind of organize your kids' work, right? So that you can get to it. But also, so I guess can you talk about the management piece? Like how,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when I was doing this in a middle school, the way that I would do it is I would use either I always had in my classroom an audio interface and a microphone set up all the time. But that was sort of unique to my situation because I was also teaching like music technology and all these other things. So I kind of had a station that had all this stuff ready to go. So I would just record straight into Logic, bounce the file out, title it the name of the class, and stick it in a folder, and it was there. You could also do just a voice memo on your phone and send it to your computer, label it, and keep it. There are ways to record like using a DAW inside your browser window. If you wanted to use something like Soundtrap or BandLab, you could use GarageBand, any of those things. The goal isn't necessarily to get the cleanest recording. It's just to get something that you can come back to and remember.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you're not necessarily looking to create a finished product. So anything that can get you a recording that is in some way audible, and then file it however you like. I would do it by classroom name, title of the song. So it would be like, this is Mrs. Jones's. Oh, now I got me and Mrs. Jones stuck in my head. It's Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones. Anyway, it's Mrs. Jones's fifth grade. The name of the song is My Cat George. And I might even put in like a little bit of information, like it's in C, because I'm not going to remember that. I'm just going to hear it and come back to it.
Oh.
And then I would save it in a file with the rest of those songs. And then when you get to a point where you're looking to have a finished recording, that kind of becomes a different set of lessons. So like how I would roll into that is I would say, okay, we've got our song and we know how the song goes and we can sing it together and we know all of our words. Now we have to make a recording. And so what's important in a recording, right? And so then you can talk about, even at the younger elementary level, like one of the most important things in a recording is that we get it clean at the beginning and clean at the end. So, I'm going to hit record, but we don't sing right away. Gotta wait. And then you do all your performance practice stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it becomes a different set of lessons. And then you just get the cleanest recording you can get. And so I'm actually sort of sad. I never got a good recording of the song about the student crawling into the road. I was so busy having a good time playing it with him on the day, I forgot to record the performance of it.
Oh.
So all I have is our demo recording, which is me playing the instruments, and a student singing. And then later, the students in the rock band played the song.
Mm-hmm.
And I never got a good recording of that. I should see, maybe his parents have one. I'll send a message. But yeah, the finished recording piece is really up to the teacher where they want to draw the line and call it done. And then how you want to present that. So like one of the things that I really liked doing was, if I would have a recording, number one, I would clear it with the parents or whatever. I would ask them like, hey, if the song involved their student, I'd be like, your student shared this story. We made it into a song. Here is the song. Is it okay with you if we, send this out and share it with our community? And I never had a parent say no to that. But it's important because students' lives aren't just their lives. They're also their families' lives. And maybe the parents don't want something out in the world, and they get to have that control. They get to have that editorial say. So you have to ask them first. But once it's there, I would have a quarterly newsletter that I sent out to my parents, and I would send an email with that link, or an MP3 with that email. And it would be like, here's a song from so-and-so's fifth grade class. And here's the story of us making that song. And, it's a song for you. You can have it. It's free. There you go. And the reality is like a lot of people aren't going to listen to that, but more people are going to listen to it than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Because people really love to hear kids make things, and they love kids to show initiative and ownership. So if you're able to present to your community, hey, your students are writing about their life, here it is. More people will click on it than you think.
Well, and the kids are going to come home and say,
oh,
you have to click on, did you get the link? Did you get the link? You know? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
So after we wrote the song about Henry, Where Did Henry Go? I sent him and the student who had come up with the melody our demo recording because I didn't know if anything was going to come of it. And then we got like a little 5th grade tape trading ring where because I'm from Maine, Maine has a thing called the Maine Learning Technology Initiative where all students have one-to-one technology. So all of my 5th graders had MacBook Airs. And so they all started sending the file to each other. And like for the rest of that week, Henry and the person who had sung the song were like little rock stars in our school.
Oh.
Like everyone had heard their song and they were like, that was so good. That was so cool. And then that built so that when we performed it, all of their peers like knew the song and they were like pumped to see it in concert. It was like this really, it was like such a beautiful thing to be a part of. And it was both so childlike, but also so real. Like that's how it works in the world. At least when you're when you play in a pop music style, your friends write songs and you fall in love with them. And then you go see them at a bar somewhere and they play the song you love and you're like so into it.
Yeah.
And you love the song and you love your friends and there's the community of music making there. And it was so cool to see that modeled in a school. So yeah, it does. They trade the stuff around and it builds names and it gives kids something to really be proud of and built up about that not only did I make this thing, it also came from me. You know, I didn't just get an A for building the strongest bridge according to the bridge building instructions. Like I created this thing and it's good and I'm proud of it and it's expressive of who I am. Yeah.
And that's exactly what we want, right? We want everything you're saying. We want this music making experience to be meaningful for the students. And that's exactly what's happening. They have ownership. They are the ones making the musical decisions. They are the ones just doing all of it. And then they're the ones that can say, this is my thing. I made this thing.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful.
And while I'm talking mostly in general music context, because that's really where my heart is, there's lots of things you can do in other contexts like band and chorus and orchestra contexts.
Yeah.
That are just as rewarding and just as fulfilling. You can actually use modified songwriting approaches for this, but also there's been a lot of writing by Michelle Kashub and Janice Smith about how to do composition across the grade levels and in a bunch of different settings. If people are interested in bringing some of this into their band room or orchestra room, I would highly suggest going and looking at their work. They have targeted stuff for, I think, K-12 at this point. I don't know how they do it. They must not sleep, but they have tons of resources. I would totally suggest using those resources as well if you're looking to get into it in more of a band, orchestra, chorus world, because I think that those approaches are a little more targeted for that world. I'm a little more in the general music world generally, I guess.
Yeah. But I think the big picture concepts, they definitely, it's music.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing. This is music.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Exactly.
Well, this has been awesome. So I heard you say a little bit ago that you're something to do tomorrow. People need to go home and write a song. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Can they send their songs to you?
Yes, of course. Always. Forever.
Excellent.
I would love to hear.
There you go.
I've heard, and here's the thing. You know it won't be the worst song I've ever heard because we wrote the worst song right on this podcast.
Right here.
So it's at most the second worst song that I've ever heard.
All right. There you go. So you've heard it. Those are your instructions. Go home and write a song. I love it. Alex, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been awesome. It's just we love talking to people who are passionate about what they do, especially when it comes to, ways that we can make this music thing meaningful, long lasting, all of that for our students.
Mm-hmm.
So we appreciate it. Can you tell us one more time your website where people can find you, and if there's any other ways that you'd like people to connect with you and in the world?
My website is Mr. That's MR Alex Adams, ALEXADAMS. .com, MrAlexAdams.com. And there you'll find both all the information you could ever want about me, but also resources for songwriting and a blog that is generally about reflections from teaching. If you're interested in that kind of thing, that also has my contact information on it. At that website, you can get to me that way. I think that's probably the single best way to get to me. But I would love to hear any songs anybody writes, and that includes the two of you. So if you write a song, you have to send it to me. Those are the rules.
Okay.
I
think that sounds fair. I've got a dog looking at me right now who's like, I'm writing a song with you.
Great.
That's going to be a song about a dog. Awesome. Well, again, thank you. We appreciate your time and everything that you shared with us today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share it. I think empowering students is so important. And I think that the work that you've both been doing with your podcast and the book is great for music education. I think it's strong and important work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. If you liked today's episode, you will love the PassTheBatonBook.com website, where you can find free resources, coaching services, and how to support Pass the Baton. Speaking of support, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Thanks again for listening.